Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. Today we're doing a deep dive into the strategic adoption of open source software, or OSS, and really how it has just fundamentally reshaped the enterprise stack. For any professional who's focused on business efficiency, on staying ahead of the future of work, understanding this shift isn't just important, it's essential.
Absolutely. OSS has moved so far beyond being an experiment. It's now the indispensable backbone of modern tech infrastructure. There's no other way to put it.
And when we talk about that strategic importance, we have to talk about the scale,
Yeah.
the sheer scale of its consumption. The data from 2024 is frankly mind-boggling. It shows a reliance that's just accelerated exponentially.
Oh, yeah. And what's fascinating is that the volume itself proves the point. I mean, last year, NPM logged roughly 4.5 trillion requests.
Trillion with a T.
Exactly. And PyPI, which, is the engine for the Python ecosystem, it was nearing 530 billion. Even Maven Central saw 1.5 trillion requests. These aren't just big numbers. They're like the physical benchmarks of our global software supply chain.
So we're not just talking about a growing dependency. This is an operational dependency on a scale that's almost unimaginable.
That's it. That kind of activity, it just confirms that community-built software has reached full operational maturity. It signals that mainstream Fortune 500 level trust is there. So our mission in this deep dive is to move beyond just saying, okay, OSS exists, and actually extract the specific practical steps you need to take to operationalize it, to turn it from just a tool you have to use into a real competitive advantage.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey, because it does feel like this shift from a niche thing to being completely normalized happened almost overnight.
Well, if you connect it to the bigger picture, the real catalyst was the shock of 2020. That global demand for rapid scaling, when everyone shifted to remote work, it forced organizations to adopt resilient systems really, really quickly. And they found that those systems were best built using community code, integrated with cloud infrastructure. That's what drove the huge uptake in automation, orchestration, all of that.
So necessity really became the mother of strategic adoption.
Precisely. And by 2024, those moves aren't experiments anymore. Not at all. We're seeing community components fully integrated into production. We're talking CI/CD pipelines, complex data platforms, even cutting-edge AI frameworks. Organizations are now treating open source libraries as core building blocks. And this maturity has also led to a big shift in investment toward vendor-neutral tech to reduce risk.
That makes perfect sense from a risk management perspective. But what about the upside? What's the core value proposition that's driving this massive corporate commitment to something that's, fundamentally decentralized?
The value proposition is really multifaceted. Reports consistently cite faster innovation as a huge driver. Because the source code is transparent, businesses can build and integrate much more quickly. And then there's the obvious one, verifiable lower total licensing costs. And crucially, you get access to these huge developer communities that are always improving quality, always adding features, far faster than a single proprietary vendor ever could.
I think the integration piece is so often underrated. The source material points out how much better OSS integrates with modern cloud platforms and CI/CD pipelines. It just smooths out modernization and reduces that dreaded vendor lock-in.
It's all about interoperability, right? When you look at the industry specifics, for a sector like IT, the top benefits are standards and interoperability, that's at 62%, and innovation at 59%. And then you have financial services, a sector that demands extreme resilience. They also heavily prioritize standards at 59%, and they're investing heavily in CI/CD and DevOps tooling that's almost all built on OSS.
So they're leveraging community strength to meet their own very specific high-stakes demands. Okay, so that's the bright side. Community, speed, innovation. But if we're talking strategy, we have to pivot and discuss the inherent security paradox that comes with all this scale.
This is such an important point. How do we reconcile the high levels of confidence people have with the rising levels of actual exposure? The data shows this really clearly. There's high confidence. 68% of respondents see open source as more secure than proprietary options.
More secure.
Yes. They believe in the community vetting, the fast fixes, but that perception is, let's just say it's challenged by the brutal reality on the ground. Documented threats have surged right alongside adoption.
Wait, 68% feel it's more secure?
Yeah.
But the numbers we're seeing on malicious packages they're staggering. Are these threats hitting smaller libraries, or are they getting into the core projects?
The data doesn't really differentiate by criticality, but it shows the overwhelming scale of the problem. Since 2019, over 704,000 malicious packages have been identified. But the most alarming part is that 512,847 of those were documented last year alone. With trillions of requests, every tiny vulnerability is instantly global. And we know that public registries like NPM and PyPI have been particular hotspots for spam, typo squatting, malware. The community growth is fantastic, but the vulnerability growth is happening even faster.
And this is where it gets really interesting on the operational side.
Hmm?
Just managing that scale.
Hmm.
Once you adopt OSS at this level, dependency sprawl and version churn become these massive drains on your developer's productivity.
Think about the maintenance headache. Just look at Maven Central. It averages 28 or more active versions for every project. For your engineering teams, that translates directly into a massive burden of backporting and patching decisions. It just drastically increases the testing required for even minor updates.
It sounds like trying to manage a massive family recipe book that everyone's updating all the time with conflicting notes. You have to test every single change to make sure the dish doesn't become poisonous.
That's a perfect analogy, exactly. And we can't talk about this growth without focusing on AI and machine learning. Python's ecosystem is the engine driving AML, but it introduces just enormous complexity. These models rely on these deep dependency trees, libraries relying on other libraries, on, creating this vast attack surface that's really hard to map and control.
And that density leads to the problem of noise. All the STAM, the low-quality packages, it just wastes developer time. So what are the practical, actionable solutions the source material points to for reducing that noise?
Well, the sources strongly advocate for using curated catalogs and internal mirrors. So instead of letting developers just pull code from anywhere on the public internet, you centralize it. And most importantly, you have to automate the vetting process. You need modern tooling for that.
Okay, so we've established OSS is necessary, it's beneficial, but it's also a systemic risk if it's left ungoverned. So now we shift focus to what you, our listener, can actually do. We need to move from just using community code to strategically governing it, treating these open source programs like the strategic assets they are.
Absolutely. And the first pillar of that strategic playbook has to be strategy and automation. You just can't rely on ad hoc decisions anymore. You need to publish a visible, formal OSS strategy. Define what code you'll use, which projects your organization will support, and who is responsible for the sign-offs.
A strategy is great, but how do you make sure people follow it without it becoming a huge bottleneck?
That's where the automation comes in, using policy as code. The goal here is to make compliance a guardrail, not a blocker. This means embedding secure development directly into your CI pipeline, your continuous integration process.
Okay, let's quickly clarify some of those terms for the strategic professionals listening. What does embedding secure development actually look like in practice?
In practice, it involves deploying specific automated checks. For instance, software composition analysis, or SCA. That automatically scans every dependency you use and checks it against known vulnerability databases. You also integrate SAS static analysis security testing, which scans the code you write for common flaws. These checks, combined with threat modeling and ensuring all your releases are cryptographically signed, they're mandatory safeguards now.
And beyond the checks, what are some of the practical day-to-day things that mitigate the risks we talked about?
Well, practical things include dependency pinning, so you lock your projects to a specific trusted version. Also, automated pull requests to handle updates quickly, staged deployments, and, crucially, using provenance checks. Provenance is essentially the full auditable history. Where did this software come from? Who built it? What changes were made? It's absolutely vital for high assurance environments.
That enforces the policy, but the code still relies on the community. So pillar 2 has to be investment and regional alignment. If we rely on the community, we have to invest in its health.
100%. Organizations need to budget for maintainers, maybe for sponsored work streams. And a key finding is that organizations have to allocate employee time. 55% of orgs in North America are calling for this, for things that aren't code. Writing documentation, adding tests, triage. This builds more durable teams around critical projects.
What's fascinating to me is how the strategy really changes based on region. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach at all. North America, for instance, focuses heavily on automated tooling to enforce policy, that's cited by 51%, and improving secure development. at 56%.
And you can contrast that with Europe. Europe has strong public policy support for making publicly funded software open source. So as a result, European organizations are much more focused on legal and compliance support, that's at 48%, and company-wide education at 52%. They're solving the legal and cultural hurdles at the same time.
And then in the Asia-Pacific region, the focus is more on just achieving stability through clear policy adoption at 50% and practical training at 49% to really unlock developer contributions.
So what does this all mean for you, especially if you operate globally? It means that aligning your governance and your support playbooks to these regional norms, it reduces friction a lot. And it speeds up your cloud and tech rollouts. Customizing your approach isn't a nice to have, it's a strategic necessity now. So to synthesize all this, we've seen open source move from a technical curiosity to the absolute backbone of enterprise tech. That shift brought incredible scale and clear benefits. But the challenge now is balancing that community's strength with the supply chain risks. So your final checklist has to be simple and visible. Publish a formal strategy, automate your security guardrails, fund your core maintainers, and invest heavily in training and education.
Okay, let's leave you with a forward-looking thought here, something to really push the strategic implications of this. We've noted that regulated industries, government, healthcare, financial services, they rely on rigorous checks and detailed supply chain attestations. They have to, because of their high trust requirements. At the same time, we've established that the growth of AI and ML is almost entirely reliant on Python and its high dependency density. So here's the question for those of you in those highly regulated spaces. How will this increasing reliance on complex, often opaque AI and ML frameworks force your industries to fundamentally redefine what trust and auditable provenance truly mean for your supply chain controls? That's a concept that's going to demand some profound thought as you plan your next major technology investment. That is a powerful thought to leave with and a really necessary deep dive into the realities of open source governance. Thank you for joining us today.
And if you want to understand the full context behind these global trends and playbooks, we definitely encourage you to subscribe to the SmartKeys podcast for more strategic insights on the future of work and productivity.
We have linked the full source article, Open Source Adoption, How Businesses Benefit from Community-Driven Software, right in the show notes for a deeper read. Until next time, keep diving deep.